so we left off with support staff.
Mostly minority.
Yeah, mostly minority.
Yeah.
90%
90%.
And they feel a divide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they feel like they can't communicate with the teachers, and the teachers don't value them. It's gonna be a clashing culture right there.
Just writing it down there. Include it as a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Students.
Students?
No, as stakeholders.
Students.
I think it's important to note that they're the ones who are suffering the most because of this divide. Missing tremendous amounts of class time.
Do we make inferences or we're not making inferences?
I mean, and they're not achieving.
And not
academically.
achieving.
Right.
I was gonna say that they probably don't feel valued by their teachers, and that's.
Well,
they need to
according
put-
to the comments
Yeah,
on
right,
that,
those are really
Yeah.
comments, for sure.
They wonder why, I mean, not only not valued, but why don't my teachers like me?
Right.
And that's just easy.
Nope. Right there. Yeah.
You gotta go to
And
parents?
where-
Oh,
Parents don't feel welcomed.
but there's the
I'm
two
sorry, the
groups of
minority
parents,
Right.
right?
Minority parents.
Right,
which is the majority of parents.
Majority of parents.
true.
Interesting, the word minority, but they're the majority.
It's crazy.
It's interesting too, the parents' school organization has less than 2% of, members attending or representing middle school.
Middle school.
So there's not a lot of buy-in, I guess, overall
No.
either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which we should look at.
It has to do with the 10 to
Why
12 hour
isn't it
days that they're
more
working.
Right,
yeah.
why isn't it working?
Well, most,
That's for
I
the
mean,
PTA.
from what we know, it's from a lot of their comments. They don't feel welcome. They don't treat
They
my child
work
as if.
long hours too,
Yeah.
yeah, they
They
probably.
don't treat my child as if they were
Mhm.
their own.
And then we have the white parents
Mhm.
who openly
Right,
disagree with this integration and the influx of minority students in the school.
they kinda have that deficit mindset.
Mhm. Still advocating for their own child, but in a way that might not be beneficial for the school population.
Yeah.
I'd like to get up this time.
And
My
then,
wife told me to stand.
are there any other stakeholders you want to define?
Community is
Parents.
Parents,
Yeah.
but
We didn't really hear much.
Community could be potentially some, the organizations or other supports, but I don't know if we're there yet.
We don't have anything.
Right,
I mean, we don't have facts there, but I think that we can infer that the community has changed significantly in
yeah.
the last, 15 years?
they even talked about the city of Willow undergoing the demographic change.
Mhm.
That school was like the last to integrate, and that was a huge
Right.
deal for the community.
It's a blue collar community.
Yeah.
so
That's
right,
true,
we use
yeah.
that
Yeah,
to our advantage somehow.
yeah.
Let's just throw that up so we don't have to use a whole, let's throw it up on the other stakeholders.
Yeah, ready.
Alright, so we've gotten our stakeholders and their perspectives, and now we think we might work backwards more towards the major issues,
Mhm.
as well as including challenges and strengths. So maybe we can just kind of have a conversation about those issues that we feel are most pressing.
Do we have anything yet for the major issue?
Well, we kind of identified, Marianne, you said that it's a dilemma, right? You didn't think it would be just a single problem.
Right, just because there are so many different things that could happen here to make this racial divide better. I don't think there's just one thing that we're gonna come up with. I think we have to have numerous avenues.
So how do you want to go about this?
Do we want to think of it as the outcomes that we want? Do we want to kind of compare what we have now versus what we want to see? Or do we want to identify those challenges and strengths first?
Should we identify them first and then see if we can come up with like, what is the problem or what are the dilemmas and what's happening? And
So-
then from looking at all the different challenges?
Identifying the problem first is what you're saying?
What if we looked at, I think what Meg is trying to say is I'm not sure, if we take where we are now and what we would really like to see, and then see if we can find something.
Right.
So do we look at that blue poster there for where we are now?
Yeah.
Or do we wanna look at the current situation for the where we are now? Like, I don't see us being able to make, any changes to children in poverty.
Right.
Right.
But, or, the population, but I see us being able to make, suggestions for changes to the challenges.
Why don't we
Yeah.
look at our desired outcome first, like where we would like to be, what's our ultimate, and then see what is in between that and where we wanna be.
Right.
Fabulous.
So,
Okay.
what would be the ultimate reality for this school, I think is the question we have to ask ourselves.
What is our goal?
The ultimate reality, like what would be the best possible outcome for this school,
So that all students were achieving.
Student achievement.
okay? So, all students achieving at, better levels, best levels, like, we're talking
I
about.
think probably where it's not disproportionate, where students are achieving at a proportionate rate.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Like this.
Do you wanna write that?
Possible outcomes.
That's a good one.
I think an outcome that is, I don't know if this is a direction or an outcome, but hey, I'm gonna throw it out there anyway. A staff that is cohesive and culturally responsive.
How about since we're talking about students achieving at a proportional rate, well, not even, just a reduction in referrals and suspensions and an increase of time where students are
Seat time.
spending there. And if it is going to, let's face it, kids are kids, they're gonna mess up, they're gonna be kids.
Yeah.
So, achieving at a proportionate rate, but also, referrals and suspensions at a
Mhm.
proportional rate.
Yeah, I mean, the punishment fitting the crime. I mean, the fact that there were, the data on those
Crazy.
2 white kids or whatever that were, received discipline referrals
Yeah.
out of the 53.
4% versus like 125%.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
How do you even get that?
I think we want also a welcoming atmosphere for parents,
For community.
all
yeah.
parents,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Any other desired outcomes?
Do we have anything as far as changing the attitude of the staff?
We put cohesive and culturally
Okay.
responsive staff,
Yeah, that works.
is that?
We want them to be able to engage in respectful discussions or discourse. It seems as though they don't even know how to talk to one another.
Yeah.
Like,
Would that be
it's-
something that's under like the idea of cohesiveness?
I think so, maybe like just professional conversations or,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put it right off there.
Perfect.
I mean, in my head, I think it'd be nice to see a more diverse faculty,
Right.
but, I mean, without getting rid of everybody that you have, like, what else can you, what can you do other than,
And if you think about, you also have to have the diverse teachers that would be interested in.
applying
Yeah.
for jobs?
I mean,
Right.
But that can be a long-term goal,
Sure.
Yeah.
because in the short term, no, you're not gonna get that,
Right.
but.
So
Yeah,
maybe
really
then we
recruiting.
can
Certainly
put
with
that down as a
input and
long-term,
hiring, so yeah,
I'll put that down and highlight that as long-term so we can eventually start to identify the difference between
Right.
short-term and long-term goals. So not really diverse staff, because there are support staff, but diverse teaching
Faculty, yeah.
like
Right.
staff.
Yeah.
yes, yep,
About a review of the procedures for disciplinary issues,
yeah,
because,
Can I put that under like the proportionate discipline?
sure,
more
What do you think?
preventative,
Or is that a step that we need to
I
take
think
to
that
get?
would be a step to,
So that's like a
That's
short
true.
term, why don't I put that down, so proportionate discipline is a long-term goal.
but I don't
We're
think
not
that's,
gonna get that
I
right
don't
away.
think that's a goal, I think that's a step toward a goal, you know, like, that's a way in which we would do something as opposed to a something that,
Okay,
yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
So like, but maybe like having proactive,
I'll just put that underneath proportionate discipline, and we can
right.
review of
you know what,
disciplinary
we should,
procedures.
we should parking lot it too.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. It'd be nice too, I feel like the principal's just collecting data in isolation, and it would be nice to have more involvement and buy-in with the staff to be able to do that as a collective.
Is that a step as well toward these things,
Yeah,
or is
Could
that?
be.
that'd be the
Yeah,
cohesive, right?
no, it could be,
It's a
Right,
step
that goes
towards
to
cohesiveness.
yeah, true,
So more, I'm gonna parking lot that too.
Good.
I think we have a good desired outcome, or it's a good set of desired outcomes. I think it might be time to, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
cross-reference, where are we
Right.
Yep.
with the challenges?
So racial tension, what do we have that's addressing?
Oh, you know what, we have, so I think some of the things like short and long-term action, so I think if we're saying our long-term thing is this, we can say as an
pick
action,
apart
a
what,
short-term one would be review the disciplinary procedures. A short-term one action would be teachers taking more of an active role in this data collection, so I think we can kind of,
okay. So,
So looking at those, possibilities, have we addressed our challenges there that the superintendent wanted us to?
I mean, the first thing the superintendent says is that, namely promoting the success of the minority students. So that's like a huge,
That's our first bullet on our desired outcomes.
and I really think if you can get to that, then the other stuff is probably falling into place because you're achieving the ultimate goal.
I think, you know, if you start, if you are achieving those other things, then students might start to achieve more.
Yeah,
Proportionately might not be
No.
that's the
but I think
ultimate
you
desired
need those
outcome,
other
but-
things probably to get
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
You know, so
Yeah.
I think we have to start working and our short-term actions have to be involved in the other areas in order to get to that long-term action plan.
Mhm.
So we're gonna move towards the short-term action plan now?
Well, are we able to state what the problem is in a concise, succinct manner yet? Can we say, this is the problem that we're facing, this is what we have to address immediately, and this is where we need to go?
When I think
What's
about
there?
schools and the purpose to educate your kids, I think the ultimate problem is that students are not achieving, and here are the reasons why and what we can do to help get to there. But I think a big overarching problem is that students are not achieving, and they're not doing so proportionately.
But why are they not achieving?
Right, right.
so
Yeah,
the
and
staff
that's-
is not equipped to respond to their needs, you know. adequate manner.
Yeah.
I still feel like that tension piece, we need to also address that,
Well, I think
In
you
an
just did,
issue.
didn't you?
yeah,
Through the actual problem, I think that's because the staff isn't equipped and
that's true,
there needs to be more training and
yeah.
something.
I think we have more of a dilemma where there's multiple problems in place that there's not, I think it's more of a dilemma, not one fixed problem.
What do you think, Brittany?
I concur. Yeah, there is the academic problem, there is the racial
Culture.
tension problem, the cultural problem.
And the community issue, just that piece about the integration that is, you
And
know,
I don't
that's a
know
big
that,
deal.
I don't know that like are there systems in place to, you know, to address these?
It looks, just throwing this out, it looks to me that the school never addressed the problem when it was faced with change. When it was originally faced with change and integrating a school, it never faced that problem to begin with. So therefore, the school is still operating on an antiquated model that doesn't serve the needs of the students, doesn't serve the needs of the community, and really doesn't serve the needs of its own staff very well.
So what's the problem?
That.
Well, maybe the problem is the schools the school's not prepared for the system of integration that they just went through without, they weren't prepared to do that. And it sounds like they're kind of forced into it anyway, they didn't really.
And they aren't yet able to
They're the
react
last
to the
people to do it.
demographic shifts going on either.
Yeah.
So is that what we could state as our problem, or does the problem have to be along the lines of something that we could solve? Or could we? Cause when I'm hearing the problem that was just, described, it sounds like that was the problem years ago. So we could just say that's the problem, and so now we're finding the solution now? Is that where we're
I
going
think
with
that
this?
is the problem
think we're
years ago,
stuck.
like though,
Yeah.
that,
Right.
Yeah.
what happened then is just playing out right now.
And getting worse.
And it's getting worse,
Right.
and you have that problem without the systems in place, and you have this, people with their own belief systems, no one's doing anything about it, it's just getting worse.
We get the problem.
You could. Do you feel that's it?
I mean, we can always
That's part
change
of
it,
it,
right,
yeah.
we can always.
Yeah.
I just wanna get this down and we could add to it.
So the problem,
Is there
Adam, can you repeat what
Our
you said in
dilemma,
your
Or
words?
is the
I
problem
could
just
try.
the fracturing of the staff? Is that the problem? That we
I
don't
think that's
have,
Well, I
we
think-
have top-down people envisioning
But I
something
think-
that's much different than other people.
That goes with Adam saying like the lack of systems in place to handle the integration of the schools. That fractured staff, that fractured community,
That's true.
and the kids are
Kind of
suffering
like
because of
they're
it.
stuck in,
Cascading.
they're stuck
Right.
in this
It's
cycle.
like the
Right.
bubbles.
And you know, it was
that Andy
probably
was talking
fine
about.
for the first couple of years after it went through, and then they started to see some change, and then they started to see some change, and now it's gotten to the point where this being stuck in an old way of thinking in a new reality is really causing issues for the students and the community.
Old way of thinking, and the student body is changing, you know, but nothing else has changed. The student body has changed, but the frame of mind hasn't changed. The people that are teaching the students and running the district, they do not reflect the students in the district, and that hasn't changed, you know.
Right, so
Like,
it's
'cause
stagnation.
if you think about the board, that's representing the people, but the people are a certain amount of demographics, and then the board does not represent that at all, so I think.
Andy's nodding along with that.
What's that?
So you're nodding along with that.
I
We're
like
on
it.
camera,
It's not
let's make
nodding
sure it's
off.
recorded.
Yeah.
So, you guys, we can come to a consensus about what to write.
Yeah, help me wordsmith that, I was too wordy.
Why don't can we jot some notes down and then come to
Mhm.
everyone just jot some notes down?
I mean, I don't think that needs to be the final thing, so yeah, that was good though. So you could just get.
We
that
can always
down,
change it.
Just add to it. How long am I gonna
What did I say? So, it's gorgeous lettering too.
What a discussion.
The school is stuck in an old way of operating, an old way of thinking that is not reflective of the needs of the students or community. I think I just truncated that a
Yeah,
little
that's good.
That's good.
Good.
I'm just
No.
thinking about the wording.
The school isn't current meeting the need of the current student population?
But why?
Yeah, that's,
Which is,
is
because
it
it's
because of the
not-
lack of systems in place to deal with that? Or is it because of their belief system in the community or the school?
Is that jumping ahead to the causes and the obstacles?
I'm trying to,
No,
I'm
it
trying to wrap my
is.
head around
That's-
what
It is.
Adam said as being the problem, I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Can we put something very general and then we could add bubbles to it?
He wants the bubbles. You gotta do something with the
It's
bubbles
a
over
new nickname,
there.
I see it.
Okay, say that again, Adam. I'm trying to wrap my head and
Yeah,
really
sure.
break it down word
Okay.
for word, what you just said.
The school is operating under an old way of thinking in a new reality. And
And
is therefore not meeting the needs of the students and the community.
Under an old way of thinking.
I know we're still wordsmithing it, but that word old, I just think it's a little,
Should we break it down?
little value laden. I don't know if
Right.
when we talk about a problem, should our problem be more factual? Because maybe there are some old staff there and they're, what's wrong with the old way of thinking, you know?
Right.
That's
What's
how I
old
was
about
kind
it,
of
right?
thinking, but I think this is a good starting point and we can kind of
Okay.
add and change things and to get to the,
Well, there's obviously a problem with the old way of thinking.
Yeah,
but the term old is like, what does that even mean?
yeah.
I think that old way of thinking probably, and I'm just guessing what you're talking about, is the civil rights movement thinking,
Traditional.
where they were pre-civil rights and now
They're
the
not-
times have changed, but they are still
Mhm.
in the pre-civil rights before integration way of thinking.
They're thinking
Is that-
without,
40 seconds
Is that
ago.
what you're talking about?
Yeah.
They're in that thinking.
they're not putting equitable practices at the forefront. The thinking is still that bootstrap where everyone can achieve when we really need to see differences in how to do
That was good. Can you
that. No.
add that in there?
With the pre-Brown versus Board era.
Right, which is
Old.
old.
Mhm.
Right.
There aren't any teachers
I
teaching
know.
that.
Right, that's
Yeah.
We've got a couple of things.
It's just, I mean, it's just crazy to,
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, where are we here? Do we wanna talk about, the strengths that we have? Do we have kind of a starting point to look at?
Here you have support from your superintendent
Mm-hmm.
to address these. You do have some actions in your school of teachers. You're trying to address, your problem with, data rather than pointing fingers. But it's still perceived as
Pointing fingers.
pointing
Right.
fingers.
Right.
I think that goes back to doing it on your own on an island.
Mm-hmm.
You said support from some colleagues and,
Mhm.
and teachers, right?
Yep.
have data, you have data, okay. You have your mentors, right?
Yeah,
And you've spent that year and a half working
previously.
with
yeah.
colleague, you know, with your, principal colleagues, or leadership colleagues who work towards eliminating academic and discipline disparities. So, you know, it's moving forward, but then that might, you know, making those allegiances, you might be able to replicate some of the things that they've done.
Also, I mean, the principal had previous experience and research in this area, so he or she seems like
Yeah.
they have experience in this area and background knowledge, so.
Background
Mhm.
knowledge, important. The, children, parents, and community consider you an advocate.
Mhm.
You've been in the district for a while, too, it's not your first
Right.
rodeo.
It's a good list of strengths to start with. So, clearly, as we've talked about already, we're looking at something that, there's a lot of different values at stake, so we're not just looking at a single solitary problem. I don't think we're looking at a solitary problem, I think we're looking at something that's going to include a lot of different values, a lot of different changes, and a lot of different possible desired outcomes. But what's our real net? That is terrible, I can't stick on that. Um,
Right over there,
Okay,
part of the whiteboard, hang on to.
alright. So we've talked about this kind of being an issue that we've seen existent. Is there anywhere that we've seen it change positively? I've seen an old way of thinking shift to meet the needs of the community and the students better, especially in a diverse population.
Yes, but,
Well, the beginnings of a shift.
mhm. I just think no matter what we do, there is going to be, you know, a lot of opposition. Some people are gonna be real gung ho for it. There is gonna be opposition. We just have to find some small ways to make, small victories. You know, are there some classrooms where kids aren't being sent out? Are there classrooms where, you know, kids aren't saying that, how come my teachers don't like me?
Right.
Or, I wish my teachers weren't so mad all the time.
Something we could have them actually lead PD or something.
Yes. Are those like our successful exceptions.
Right.
Our
Or can-
classrooms within the school itself.
Yeah, usually positive deviates.
Yeah. And maybe leveraging more our support staff, maybe giving them more of the kind of the, maybe they are able to connect better with students, and that's just something that's not appreciated in the current system.
Okay. Where are we? Let's take let's take stock, let's step back, take stock of where we are. What we have done so far is to look at just the facts. Here's what we pulled out. We talked about what are the major challenges as identified by the superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
We looked at possible outcomes that we might like in an ideal world. We talked about our stakeholders, who they are, and some of their thoughts. We didn't really get very much into what their reactions might be should
Right.
things start to change or where they're at too deeply. We identified a problem, although it's still in the,
Mm-hmm.
It's a working
it's a
problem.
work in progress, right? And then we identified where our strengths are, okay?
Mhm.
What next? Where do we need to go next?
Seems like we've done a lot of divergent thinking, now we need to do the convergent thinking, or do we need to start to,
Well, we can look at some of
Identify
these
some
possible
steps.
outcomes and brainstorm what can you do to help support that, and think about, and then we can eventually take those things and say what's long-term and what's short-term. As a way of thinking, just looking at the outcomes and brainstorming, what can we do to get there? What are some things that we've seen that are successful? What can we do to get there? And is that long-term or is that short-term after the fact?
Have we covered enough of the underlying causes behind all these things? Like, do we need to like really kind of dig
Underneath
into
the
that a little
problem.
bit?
Like bubble off of that problem, other issues
Right,
that cause.
and talk about
right,
beliefs
see?
and underlying kind of issues going on.
or what information we don't have?
Right, I think that's
Right.
important.
Any questions we have?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think talking about values and beliefs is important at this point. Of each of the groups.
Mm-hmm. Cause that's gonna be a pretty significant obstacle, I would think.
Is that part
Okay.
of the short term, cause, is that what we're getting into now? Is
I
what
think that would
the
come
short-term
after.
solutions?
When we start to kind of, we're still kind of, in my mind, I think we're still trying to suss out exactly how we're gonna, tackle what is the major issue at
Yeah.
play, and then we can develop those actions later on.
And
I
I
would-
think,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead, Andy.
I was just gonna say that I was thinking that, that'd be my first step, is, you know, you have to talk about this explicitly, directly with everyone, like, well, this is what's happening, these are the statements that are being made. If we're here to help all students, you know, what are we doing? So, I just think that that's the first step in the solving the problem, is just the open dialogue.
Yeah.
Because the communication seems to be lacking
I'm
here.
gonna put That's big. So definitely one of our obstacles is this lack of open dialogue, right? So that'd be one thing we've gotta tackle.
So right now we're adding to the problem.
I don't know if we're adding to the problem, but we're finding reasons for the problem.
Maybe we should look at obstacles that relate to the problem, and then we can build off of that to figure out, well, how will we directly address those?
Or is it obstacles to our outcomes?
Yeah, I think it's
Right,
obstacles that
yeah.
support the problem,
Yeah,
that are standing in the way of our,
Problem,
yeah.
yeah,
But I think that a lack of open dialogue, yes, is one of them.
Mhm.
mhm.
Like, I can't think of an obstacle to students achieving proportionately, like, that's,
Possibly
Well, I
poor
think,
pedagogy.
Yeah,
well,
curriculum. is
and I
not
also
aligned.
think
okay, thank you.
if you're looking at,
From the instructional code.
I know, right? If you're looking at the people teaching the children, if they're not culturally responsive and they're not acknowledging their students and they just have a different belief system,
Yeah.
you know, there has to be some kind of an open dialogue to get this conversation going to help support that.
How about a misunderstanding of what poverty does to students when they're in the classroom, like what effects that does, you know, what snowball effect that can have. You didn't like the ones you were given?
Those are all white.
They have little colors on them for you.
So lack of communication, open dialogue.
I mean, when I think of disproportionate discipline, I.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna type that. Sorry.
I think it's, when I think about disproportionate discipline, I think it's like what Adam was saying, like not understanding the people in front of you.
Right.
Poverty, race, culture,
Mhm.
so,
Not understanding students. Culture.
and I think also incorporated in that is just the idea of curriculum and teaching pedagogy
Mhm.
that comes into play.
So a poor curriculum, a curriculum that's not meeting the students' needs.
Right, it's
Yes.
not culturally
Mhm.
responsive. And that deficit language that comes out, that it's, you know, somehow projecting the issues on the child, when it's such a broader systemic kind of thing going on.
Mhm.
Can you say that again?
I'll try. I'll just say that the deficit language
That's what I was saying.
is projecting the issue on students and their individual abilities and not on the broader system.
And I also think the idea of not having a aligned vision, there's a vision, and the people carrying it out are not
It's not
actually in
shared.
support of it, and it's not a shared vision, so I think that's a big issue, you
I
know.
agree with that.
We
Yes.
integrated, we did all
Step
this stuff, and
one.
we don't
Yeah,
have a
step
shared
one.
That's a
vision.
big issue.
And it only took us 2 hours to get to that.
That's good.
Somebody said it.
Okay. Timekeeper, what are we done?
We're at 6:30 right now.
We've only,
So
we
how long
started
have
at
we
5:04.
Okay.
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 We've been moving right along. Have you needed to stop us?
I,
5:04.
all
Do you
right.
want to take a break?
No.
Okay. Anyone else? Sophia doesn't want to take a break. Anyone else?
No, I'm good for a few more
Yeah,
minutes.
let's keep
Alright.
going.
We're on a roll,
Okay.
we got the shared vision, they don't have that.
Consensus.
And I,
No
maybe,
breaks.
you know,
No
the
break.
idea of not having, the idea of not having the shared vision and the shared, I'm thinking about having the shared philosophy, vision, having all those things, that goes with the old way of thinking
Right,
with a new
Right.
reality, so that's,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so can we go back to, like the first page, those 3 bullets in the middle? The current core beliefs of this school, the political, social, cultural, educational conditions influencing the school, and then how will you use the data that you currently have? And is there any other information you would wanna collect? Do you think we've really gotten out the core beliefs?
No.
I mean,
No. I
don't think we have.
I don't think,
No, we need to.
nobody's said the word racist yet.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
well, I think maybe the old way of thinking is kind of, and I guess we have to define that more, like what Marianne said, is this old way of thinking.
Right.
That's like the segregation type thinking, the
Mhm.
us versus them type thinking. And I think that's part of the big problem, is that there's this core belief in the district from the superintendent, and then there's a core belief of the
Of
people
the
serving the
Conflicts,
students
Yeah,
and the community, and there's,
yeah,
it's like very
Mhm.
different.
yeah.
I'm trying to make America great again. Is it
Parking lot,
So-
something I
It was
have to say
a,
about
it was a
that.
Trump reference.
Right.
I know,
That you're gonna start talking about building a wall,
I'm in a parking lot.
about
so
building
comments.
bridges, not walls. But that, I mean, but like, I know I just said that,
Well,
but that
let's-
we need to
okay.
build a bridge.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, the core belief, the superintendent who is like coming in and creates this vision for the district, right, is really truly the idea of success for all students, including the minorities, success for them too. And then you look at the core beliefs of different people, and we can kind of, I guess we can kind of get into that more and add to those
Yeah.
stakeholder
Yeah.
things.
But I
Do you
think-
want, do you wanna just jot them down on that paper?
Yeah, I don't
That
know.
would be
Right.
great.
So, but you did say, the success for all students, but there are those other two things, the disciplinary policies and the support for students and their families. Okay,
So, who do we start with for core beliefs? Where do we go? I mean, core beliefs of the school, I don't know if the school is really, has a really great core.
Teacher, right,
Do we
No.
do the teachers right
The
there?
principal
We
has a
wanted to-
belief,
Right.
and is doing this work, but the people
Yeah.
that are there do not.
Right.
So that's like,
and within the
That's a
teaching
problem with
staff too, it's even
Yeah.
divided further,
and
so.
I feel like I'm starting to see this problem shift into a dilemma, because there's this, and then there's plus, in that building itself, there's the principal's belief and
Right.
what the principal is acting out into the school,
Mhm.
and then what everyone else believes, and
Yeah.
they're not buying into it.
Yeah, it's really influencing the behavior that you see, which in turn influences the results.
Right.
I mean, this is just a comment on the side, thinking about this issue as a whole. I think when you start and just think about responsive people who are not gonna like having to deal with and tackle some of these issues because they just believe differently, I think those people usually end up choosing another vision to follow. They will leave the school or go somewhere else where they feel more comfortable because they just don't align. And those who will follow with the right supports we have to come up with would eventually change. So I think I'll parking lot that note.
Great. I think that's a good statement though.
But there's also, I mean, they also talk about rumors, and the newest rumor, and this rumor, and I just think the easiest way to squelch the rumors is to be transparent. Like you said, like we said, let me tell you what my vision is here, what's our plan, so that's really what,
And that goes back to Andy's open dialogue aspect, that they don't have that, they don't either have those skills, I guess, it
Right.
comes down to, I don't know.
so it really is a mini school improvement plan, but we gotta start with that.
Is that what we're moving towards?
Do we,
I think so, I think that would be our
Is that our next step?
presentation first to the superintendent and then to our faculty and parents and. Do we need to just talk quickly about anything about the data here, or?
Well, I think that the data that's, especially, I mean, we've talked about the discipline data, we've talked about the achievement data, but talking about the collected comments data,
oh, I
you
know.
talk about being very transparent about core beliefs of your stakeholders. It's in those comments. I mean, the teachers' core beliefs are that the kids are bad and that they're doing all the right things. So kids are bad, there's nothing we can do, period, end of story.
It's almost like a step deeper beyond that, cause there's one that says, I'm afraid of blacks and I'm afraid
Yeah.
of these children.
Yeah.
Like, there's a fear, it's not just reacting cause they don't like someone, like, they really have, they're so disengaged from each other, they don't even really, they're
Right.
fearful of one another.
So that's something we haven't talked about, is our outcome is having a safe school.
Right.
But if you look at, some of these discipline referrals, okay, dress code violation,
Right.
25,
Right.
really? Or late to class.
Yeah, and that,
Disrespect, disruption, okay, I can give it, fighting, yeah, but some of those other ones, but
I mean,
the disconnect between.
I understand fighting, but
Yes.
someone being disrespectful, I think you can if you have the
Handle it in
right
your classroom.
right.
training, you can handle this in your classroom.
So
and
that's gonna go towards what kind of professional development
even
we need
disruption.
to,
Mhm.
we need to suggest or put into our plan.
And if you look at the amount of people sent to the office and then look at the number of interventions that were given out, it's like so disproportionate.
Yes.
If there's that many issues, why are we not intervening and supporting the kids?
So we need our vision, we need some professional development here.
Do we wanna talk
Need
about
some
things
community
that we
building.
still want to know or that we need to find out more about? That was one aspect I don't think we've talked about either.
Can you repeat that?
Just what, if we have other pieces of information that we need or data.
It would be interesting if we're talking about some type of PD being involved, it would be interesting to know what was previously done
That's
and the
agreed.
follow-up and what kind of a
Yeah.
delivery it was.
It's a great one.
And it would be interesting to know just what steps were taken to prepare the school for the integration
So history, more
previously.
history.
It would be interesting to know that, like, you know,
Yes.
we're thinking it comes from this way, but what was in place? How did they do this and prepare the community and the students and everyone for this big change?
Mhm.
And what is the school's current vision and the district?
Mhm.
You mean, what are the words?
Yeah, what are the,
Right.
Yeah.
what are the
Mhm.
words and
Right.
it would be interesting to know what systems are in place to align their work to the vision, you know? That would be interesting to know, cause right now we're just looking at people, what they're saying and just the discipline and things like that, but it would be nice to know what does the alignment look like, or what do they think they're calling alignment?
Curious too about the hiring process. I know that's something that we thought of as maybe as a long term, but how do they hire staff? What does that look like?
And advertise for,
Yeah.
recruit.
Or where does the staff live?
Mhm.
Because if their neighborhood is predominantly people of color, then they're coming from outside the neighborhood into the school.
And they talked about the teacher evaluations, it'd be interesting to know what that system looks like.
Mhm.
So most of our questions are system
Yeah.
type questions.
Yeah.
A lot of this is about culture, but, and even politics, the way people are interacting with one
Oh, yeah.
another in that sense,
Mhm.
but we're missing a lot of systems
Mhm.
that we don't know about, or maybe they're not in place, which is why they weren't talked about.
Well, in order to, I think the political things would come in when we start talking about leveraging our, you know, the people who are on our side.
Yeah.
Alright.
Do we feel like we've covered the core beliefs of each group?
But we were gonna list them.
Do we wanna do that?
Yeah,
Or do we feel
we
like
keep
we
moving
know
on.
it and we just don't
We
need to
could
record
record
it?
just write a little bit.
Yeah, to get something
Yeah.
on there, yeah.
I think we have some things, like,
Mhm.
don't feel valued,
Yeah,
don't feel
that'd be
valued.
Yeah.
Don't feel welcome.
So I think, you know.
Don't have anything for the teachers.
Right.
Well, this, like some of the parents, this openly disagreeing, that's like,
Mhm.
when we think about the core beliefs of the mentors and the white colleagues, like the mentor said, why bother, they just look at us like we're, and then the white colleagues are kind of, I'm trying to think about exactly what it said.
They don't value the three mentors.
You're hanging out with the wrong people.
Yeah,
Right.
so.
Some three
I think there's
mentors.
racial tension here,
Yeah.
right, so if I just write that
Yeah.
underneath, I think that'll be good.
Is that good?
And
That way-
superintendent,
Yeah.
core value, like the
She
success
believes
for
in equity,
minorities, equity.
yeah.
Oh, teachers.
I mean, there's racial tension here too between the two
Mhm.
parties, so.
I don't know if that's a belief or
No,
if
it's
it's
not,
a,
it's just, I think it's just something to acknowledge that there's racist beliefs here, and then there's people that don't feel valued or feel
So why don't we just,
underrepresented in a certain way.
well, why don't we just say they don't believe that these kids can learn?
Right.
They feel
That's
like they're not
right.
Yeah.
at
That's,
fault.
Right.
yeah, it's not their fault, these kids can't learn.
yep, I mean, we're talking about 99% of teachers being,
And they believe, it's over here, they believe the kids are unmotivated and cannot learn because they're so.
Don't believe minority students can learn is really what
Right,
they're, what it
yes.
is, or the Black and Latino students.
And that's the kind of the same with the white parents. They, you know, they don't want their students to be integrated with students that they feel are not as strong, right?
intellectually, yeah.
Yeah, is that what they said?
Something about intellectual.
Yeah, something.
We have bad kids, they believe that the kids are bad, too. I mean, they said, we have bad kids, it never used to be this way when I went here.
Yeah,
So maybe that does go back
Yeah.
to saying old.
Right? Back in the day.
It's teachers who believe that they should teach the way that they were taught.
what about besides not feeling welcome, I mean, that's something the way they feel, but what do the minority parents believe? They don't believe that they don't believe that they're valued, they don't believe that they believe that they're not wanted, they believe that they're underqualified to advocate for their kids.
I feel like they also believe that the teachers are not on their side, you know? It's an
There's-
us versus them.
Right, there's no partnership.
I mean, I get the impression that they don't even feel like they're worth even
Right.
trying to get the teachers on there, like they don't feel worth,
Right.
like they're worth even fighting for them, their
Mhm.
kids or themselves.
Yeah, I get a similar feeling reading this.